Yeah.
So before we start reading individual parts, what is the overall message of Revelation? It is a message of hope.
Yes, yes.
Revelation was written, one of the last books of the Bible, probably somewhere around 90 AD. And it covers, the church at that time had undergone 2 persecutions. Diocletian, I believe, was one, and Nero was the other. And so, it costs to be a Christian. I mean, you can lose your life for being a disciple of Christ. What happened is that, so when Christians started talking to each other to identify themselves or whatever, how'd you know you were a Christian? Another useless fact. So a Christian talked to another person, he didn't know if you were a Christian or not, so how'd you know without saying a word? A fish. What they do is they scroll in the dirt, but that's how that came about in the Christian symbol. But during the persecutions, that was one way of it, like, hey, I'm a Christian. You know, drawing, smile, whatever. But anyway, so that's how the whole concept of fish came out. It is back in the persecutions. What happened is that the part of the message is, how do you tell somebody, don't worry, things are gonna get better. Smile, things are gonna get better. They smiled, and sure enough, they got worse. But when you read through Revelation, it's a message of hope. It's a message of, guys, the good guys will prevail. It's a message of, yeah, we're going through trials and tribulations right now, but we will win in the end. God will recognize us for who He is, and we will win in the end. So you got to look at Revelation from that point of view. The second thing about Revelation is what they call from the genre of apocalyptic literature. And in the Old Testament, there's another Revelation. There's not called Revelation, it's called Daniel. If you read the book of Daniel, the images in the book of Daniel are very familiar, very similar to the ones in the book of Revelation. In the book of Daniel, he's talking to the emperor of Persia or whatever, and a hand, just a hand, starts writing on a wall in blood. Just a hand. You see a physical hand writing in blood. Now, if that doesn't scare the dickens out of you, nothing will. That's worse than Paul seeing Christ. I mean, a hand writing something on a wall, that would scare the hell out of me. I mean, that gets my undivided attention immediately. But that's the same thing, because there was a persecution of Jews at that time. And so this was a, Daniel was talking, hey, we will win, we will come back, and everything. So if you go back into Revelation, a lot of the allegories, you'll see cross-references, go back to Daniel. But you gotta read Revelation for 2 points. You gotta read it, like I said, as a message of hope. And, as I always say, how do you pray to it? How do you take Revelation and read it? How do you pray? Well, we're gonna get to that in a while. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at Revelation chapters 1 through 3. With chapters 1 through 3, you go into, it says, I, John, was living in the Isle of Patmos. We write down, an angel appeared to me, write down a book, all you see, and send it to the 7 churches, etc. I turned and he was speak to me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the middle of them, one like a son of man, dressed in a long robe, tied at the waist with a belt of gold. His head and his hair were white with the whiteness of wool, like snow. His eyes like burning flame. His feet like burnished bronze that were refined in the first, and a voice like the sound of the ocean. In his right hand was holding a holy 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp sword, double-edged, and his face was like the sun shining with all its force. Can you picture that? Can you really picture that? I mean, out of his mouth was a two-edged sword. I mean, his face was shining like the sun. His hair was snow white. I mean, I find it even hard to even picture something like that. Really, it's just, but it's this is all allegorical. This is all painting, you might say, a picture. Fortunately, I tried to get my thing. I couldn't. I already showed you some of the pictures I had, but I couldn't interface with that baby up there. So, all right, beginning of Revelation, what's happened is this guy, this person appears to John. John says, I fell at his feet, and then but he laid his right hand on me and said, do not be afraid. It is I, the first and the last, the living one. I was dead, but look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and of Hades. Now write down all that you see of present happenings and what is still to come. The secret of the 7 stars, the secret of the gold lampstands, etc. So John goes into the 7 letters. And what happens is that there were 7 communities in Asia Minor, basically most of them concentrated in what we would today call Turkey. And it was Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamon, Galatia, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. He writes letters of encouragement, but he also gives a kick in the backside. And the kick in the backside is, I'll read from Pergamon. I have it open right here. Write to the angel of the church in Pergamon, say, here is the message of the one who has a sharp sword, double-edged. I know where you live, in the place where Satan is enthroned, and that you still hold firmly to my name, and did not disown your faith to me, even when my faithful witness Antipas was killed among you, where Satan lives. Nevertheless, I have 1 or 2 charges against you. Pergamon had a very big shrine to the devil. So when you're having a Christian community right in the heart of devil worship, it takes a lot of guts to be a Christian because you're in the heart of devil worship. And as he says, Antipas was killed among you, where Satan lives. That's where he refers to this. He says, nevertheless, I have 1 or 2 charges against you. Some of you are followers of Balaam, who taught Balak to set a trap for the Israelites, so they committed adultery by eating food that had been sacrificed. Now among you there are some of you who also follow the teaching of Nicolaitans. So repent, or I shall soon come and attack these people with the sword out of my mouth. Let anyone who can hear listen to what the Spirit is saying. That was the Pergamon, and he had the other 6 churches had very similar letters. In other words, they would read, guys are doing a nice job, but he lays low with the but. And so what's happened is these quote letters were circulated not just among these 7 churches, which were circulated in all the Christian communities, because what was happening in these 7 churches was also happening in the other communities. It wasn't isolated events. I mean, if you were sacrificing the idols of one community, somewhere in another community, they were probably sacrificing the idols also. So these letters were basically an admonition to all the various churches to come back in life. Get rid of these pagan practices. Welcome one another. Be true disciples of Christ. All right, let's read. Now, my favorite part of the whole Bible, that is including, I can't really say because I hate you. My favorite book of the Bible is Tobit. I love Tobit. Ruth is number 2. And Revelation 4 is probably number 3. I love because Revelation 4 for me becomes a prayer. That's one of the reasons I like it. That's what I was playing for you before it was Unto the Lamb. So I can read this because again, you got the symbolism is very difficult to understand in some cases. Then in my vision I saw thou open the heaven and heard the same voice speaking to me, the voice like a trumpet saying, come up here, I will show you what is to take place in the future. Big deal. I will show you what is to take place in the future. With that I fell into an ecstasy and I saw a throne standing in heaven. And the one who was sitting on the throne, and the one sitting there looked like a diamond and a ruby. There was a rainbow encircling the throne, and this looked like an emerald. Around the throne in a circle were 24 thrones, and on them 24 elders sitting. dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. Flashes of lightning were coming from the throne, and the sound of peals of thunder. In the front of the throne were 7 burning lampstands, and the 7 spirits of God. In front of the throne was a sea as transparent as crystal. In the middle of the throne and around it were 4 living creatures, all studded with eyes in front and behind. The first living creature was like a lion, the second like a bull, the third living creature had a human face, and the fourth living creature like a flying eagle. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings, and it was studded with eyes all the way around as well as inside. And day and night they never stopped singing, "Holy, holy, holy. Holy is the Lord God the Almighty, who was, and is to come." Every time the living creatures glorified and honored the one who gave thanks, the 24 elders prostrated themselves before him to worship the one who lives forever and ever. And they threw down their crowns in front of the throne, saying, "You are worthy, O our Lord and God. You received glory and you honor and power. For you made this whole universe by your will. When it did not exist, it was created."
What do the 24 represent?
I'm sorry?
What do the 24 represent?
What do the 24 represent?
I don't know. I don't know. Then I saw in the middle of the throne the 4 living creatures circling the elders. 12, by the way, the 12 would have been the apostles, could have been the apostles plus the tribes of Israel. That had to be elite because you got 12 and 12. That's the only reason I can think of. I saw a lamb standing that seemed to have been sacrificed. It had 7 horns, it had 7 eyes, and the 7 spirits that God had sent over the whole world. The Lamb came forward to take the scroll from the right hand of the one sitting on the throne. And when he took it, the 4 living creatures prostrated themselves before him with the 24 elders. Each of them was holding a harp and had a gold bowl full of incense, which was the prayer of the saints. And they sang a new hymn. "You are worthy to take the scroll and break its seals, because you were sacrificed, and with your blood you bought people for God, of every race, language, people, and nation, and made them a line of kings and priests for God to rule the world." In my vision I heard the sound of an immense number of angels gathered around the throne, and the living creatures and the elders. There were 10,000 times 10,000 of them, and thousands upon thousands, loudly chanting, "Worthy is the Lamb that was sacrificed to receive power, riches, wisdom, strength, honor, glory, and blessing." And then I heard all living things in creation, everything that lives in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and the sea, crying out, "To the one who is seated on the throne, and unto the Lamb, be all praise, honor, glory, and power, forever and ever." That's a fantastic prayer. To the one seated on the throne, and to the Lamb, be praise, honor, glory, and power, forever and ever. That is one of my favorite prayers. It really is. Anyway. The 4 living creatures said amen, and the elders prostrated themselves. So it goes on, chapter 6 here, the Lamb breaks the seal. We move up to chapter 7. It's God's servants. Next I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the world to keep away from blowing hard over land or sea or any tree. Then I saw another angel rise with the sunrise, carrying the seal of the living God. He called in a powerful voice to the 4 angels, whose duty was to devastate the land and the sea. "Wait before you do any damage, or land or sea, or to the trees, until we have put the seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God." And I heard how many had been sealed, 144,000 out of the tribes of Israel. I can stop that for a second. Some of you might have heard there's some sects say that there are only 144,000 saved people. The rest of them, everybody else is going to hell. The 144,000 comes from that paragraph I just read, Revelation, because they're taking it literally. They're saying that I heard how many have been sealed, 144,000, all from the tribes of Israel. 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, gives to 144, but For some, when people get that is, it's they're reading that sentence very, very literally. And part of the problem is they're not going further on where they tell about the martyrs who have washed their robes in blood and they're wearing, their robes have turned white. And there's greater numbers than 144,000, but they kind of miss that. They focus on just this number here. Again, taking something out of context without reading the whole totality and saying, okay, this is how it goes. After that, I saw there was a huge number, impossible for anyone to count, the people from every nation, race, tribe, and language. They were standing in front of the throne and in front of the Lamb, dressed in white robes with holy palms in their hands. They shouted in a loud voice, "Salvation to our God who sits on the throne and unto the Lamb." And all the angels were standing in a circle around the throne, surrounding the elders and the four living creatures, prostrating themselves before the throne and touching the ground with their foreheads, worshiping. Praise and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving and honor, power and strength to our God forever and ever. One of the elders that spoke to me asked, "Who are these people dressed in white robes, and where have they come from?" And I answered him, "You can tell me, sir." Then he said, "These are the people who have been through the great trial. They have washed their robes white again in the blood of the Lamb. This is why they are standing in front of God's throne and serving Him day and night in His sanctuary. And the one who sits on the throne will spread His hand over them. They will never hunger or thirst again, and sun and scorching wind will never plague them, because the Lamb who is at the heart of the throne will be their shepherd and will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away all the tears from their eyes." I think you've heard that's a very famous saying, God wiping the tears from their eye. This is where it's from. Again, at the beginning of that, it says there were a huge number, impossible for anybody to count. Well, that disagrees with the 144,000. I mean, huge number is not bigger than 144,000. But again, the author of Revelation is not trying to make things clear. He's writing in a code. He's writing in something that a Christian would understand, but a non-Christian, it would be gibberish. But he's saying, yeah, guys, you're getting persecuted now, but the reward is coming. All right, let's go to 12 real fast. All right, this is also a very famous thing. This appears in the lectionary readings. It's chapter 12. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman robed with the sun, standing on the moon, with a head, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and in labor, crying aloud in the pangs of childbirth. Then a second sign appeared in the sky. There was a huge red dragon with 7 heads and 7 horns, and each of the 7 heads crowned with a coronet. Its tail swept a third of the stars from the sky and hurled them to the ground. And the dragon stepped in front of the woman as she was about the point of giving birth, so that it could eat the child as it was born. Let me stop there. The 12 stars that can be interpreted basically 2 ways. It can represent the 12 tribes of Israel, or it can represent the 12 apostles. She is standing on, robed with the sun, standing on the moon. Very similar picture up to this one over here. If you look behind me, you see the sun and the moon in that picture. Very dissimilar, is very present. Going back, so it can eat the child. The woman was delivered of a boy, the son who was to rule all nations with an iron scepter. The child was taken straight up to God and to His throne, while the woman escaped into the desert, where God had prepared a place for her to be looked after for 1,260 days. And now a war broke out in heaven, where Michael with his angels attacked the dragon. The dragon fought back with his angels, but they were defeated and driven out of heaven. The great dragon, the primeval serpent, known as the devil or Satan, who had led all the world astray, was hurled down to the earth, and his angels were hurled down with him. Then I heard a voice shout from heaven, "Salvation and power and empire forever have been won by our God. and all authority for his Christ. Now that the accusers who accuse our brothers day and night before our God has been brought down. They have triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of which they were born witness, because even to the face of death they did not cling to life. He's talking about the martyrs there. So let the heavens rejoice, and all who live there. But for you, the earth and sea, disaster is coming, because the devil has gone down in a rage, and knowing that he has little time left. From here, the next few chapters, I don't want to take too much time. You can read them. The devil isn't defeated right away. The devil engages with another beast. He transfers the powers over. And it gets to the point where finally what happens, the angels take the devil and they put him lock him in a carnivorous vault or a cave after he gets his power to Gog and Magog, and the devil is there for 1,000 years. And then after the 1,000 years of peace have erupted, they sent the devil and any of people who believed in him to hell. And that was it. They put a lock on hell, and it was that way from all eternity on. You read some of this, and boy, does it open up a lot of questions that you didn't know you had before. You start going back to when you were taught your religion, you go back to the Baltimore Catechism, you go back to look and see if you can remember some of the answers. For example, creation's eternity. Okay, how do you define eternity? Well, it is. So is hell around for eternity? Well, according to this, hell is around for eternity. It really is. I would never have thought so, but I guess if you read this, it probably is. And I can understand some of the reasoning. That's cool. You know, in our day and age, you do not hear any homilies about the devil. I mean, when was the last time our pastor or anybody has preached a word where he mentioned the word devil? You don't hear it, right? You don't hear it. And yet, I always say the devil's in church to the third pew, right-hand side. Because he'd love nothing better than to get a church participant, okay? So, you want to find the devil? He's in church trying to grab somebody. Really. But our leaders don't really talk about the devil. But the reality is, he's alive, he's well, he's trying to bring as many people down with him as he possibly can. But nobody's really talking about it. And yet, you go back into here, Christ talks about the devil. I mean, you can't say the devil is not in the Bible. He is. Christ talks about it. Christ is tempted by the devil. Christ talks about going down to Hades. In other words, Christ died, descended to hell, then rose again. He descended to hell, okay? You got all these things. I mean, you can't say they're just images. They're true. So part of what's going on in our thing is the devil is real. He's alive. He's trying to suck us into his side of the deal. And I'm kind of just a little disappointed that our leadership hasn't gone more into this. Now, again, you tell me that the youngster who shot all the people down in Texas was inspired by the devil. It had to be. I mean, there's no other reason. This is all. The racial conflicts we expect, again, inspired by the devil. It's just it's there. Not that I'm mad, but I think our church should have explained more on it. In other words, you got to alert people, guys. He's alive and well, and people got to realize that he didn't disappear with Vatican II. No, I mean he didn't disappear. He's still there. You got to be aware of it. If you're aware of it, then what do you do about it? So you got to, again, that deepens your prayer life. There's a justification for that. All right, so if you go from chapter 12 through, I want to say chapter 19, you hear about the punishment of Babylon. Babylon, they mentioned the town of Babylon. Babylon is a pseudonym for Rome. Mm-hmm. They talk about the priests. So what happens is Again, they couldn't name Rome, they couldn't name the emperor by name, so they used these, what's the word I'm looking for? Names, just, when you said Babylon, everybody knew you meant Rome. When you said another name, everybody knew you meant the emperor. So I mean, it was just a common substitute. When you go to 17, you start reading where, hey, the good guys start to win. The good guys are winning now. One of the seven angels, the seven bowls came to speak and said, come here and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute, who is enthroned beside abundant waters, with whom all the kings of the earth have prostituted themselves, and who has made all the population of the world drunk with the wine of her adultery. He took me in spirit to a desert, and I saw a woman riding a scarlet beast who had 7 heads and 10 horns. I forget that. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, glittered with gold, jewels, and pearls, and was holding a gold wine cup filled with disgusting filth of her prostitution. And on her forehead was written a name, a cryptic name, Babylon the Great, the mother of all prostitutes and all the filthy practices on earth. I saw that she was drunk with the blood of the saints and drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I was completely mystified. The angel said to me, do you not understand? I will tell you the meaning of the woman. The beast you have seen was once alive and is no longer alive. It is yet to come up from the abyss, but only to go to its destruction. And the people of the world whose names have not been written since the beginning of the world in the book of life will be astonished when they see how the beast was once alive and is no longer and is still to come. It's called for shrewdness. The 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman is sitting. 7 hills are the 7 hills of Rome. The 7 heads are also 7 emperors. 5 of them have already gone. 1 is here now and 1 is yet to come. The beast who was alive is alive no longer. Is at the same time the 8th and 1 of the 7 is the 8th and 1 of the 7. He's going to his destruction. 10 horns you saw, 10 kings. The orders you saw besides the prosperous city are all people, population, nation, and language. But the 10 hours of the beast will turn against the prostitute, tear off her clothes, and leave her stark naked. Then they will eat her flesh and burn the remains in the fire. An angel, chapter 18, an angel announces the fall of Babylon. 19 is the victory and the unbelievers. Now let's get to chapter 20, 21. Again, chapter 21 is part of our liturgy. We just have this. I think it might have been a liturgy. It was one of the readings 2 weeks ago. All right, chapter 20. I saw an angel come down from heaven with the key of the abyss in his hand and an enormous chain. He overpowered the dragon, the perennial serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and changed him up for 1,000 years. He hurled him into the abyss and shut the entrance and sealed it over him to make sure he would not lead the nations astray again until 1,000 years had passed. At the end of that time, he must be released, but only for a short while. Then I saw the thrones when they took their seats, and on them were conferred the power to give judgment. I saw the souls of all who have been beheaded for having witnessed for Jesus, for having preached God's word. And those who refused to worship the beast or his statue and would not accept the brand mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. The rest of them did not come to life until the 1,000 years were over. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who share the first resurrection. The second has no power over them. They will be priests of God and of Christ and reign with them for 1,000 years. I'm going right to chapter 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The first earth had disappeared now, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. There is a bride dressed for her husband. Then I heard a loud voice call from the throne, look, your God lives among human beings. He will make his home among them. He will be with his people, and he will be their God, God with them. He will wipe away all tears from their eyes. There'll be no more death, and no more mourning or sadness or pain. The world of the past has gone. Then the one sitting on the throne spoke. He said, look, I make this, the whole creation new. Write this. What I'm saying is trustworthy, it will come true. And he said to me, it has already happened. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give water from the well of life free to anybody who is thirsty. Anyone who proves victorious will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the legacy for cowards, for those who break the word, or worship obscenities, for murderers and sexually immoral, and for sorcerers, worshippers of false gods, or any other sort of liars, is the second death, and the burning of the lake of sulfur. Oh, God. You're good. How'd you do that? Thank you.
Ah, your voice was getting hoarse.
I am getting hoarse. Thank you very much. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Thank you. Oh, God, that is good. Oh, that's just fine. One of the seven angels had the seven bowls full of the screen, full of the seven final plagues, came to speak to me and said, come here, and I will show you the bride that the Lamb has married. In the Spirit, he carried me to the top of a very high mountain and showed me Jerusalem, the holy city, coming down from heaven from God. And in all the glory of God, it glittered like some precious jewel of crystal clear diamond. Its wall was a great height, it had 12 gates. Each of the 12 gates was an angel, and over the gates was written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. On the east there were 3 gates, and the north there were 3 gates, and the south there were 3 gates, and the west 3 gates. The city walls stood on 12 foundation stones, each of which was bore the name of one of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The angel that was speaking to me was carrying a gold measuring rod to measure the city and its gates and wall. The plan of the city is perfectly square, its length the same as its breadth. He measured the city with his rod, and it was equal to 12,000 furlongs, equal in height and breadth, and equal in height. He measured its walls, and this was 44 cubits. By the way, interesting factoid, what is a cubit? Cubit is the length of your elbow to your tip of your finger. That is a cubit. So it's just a weird piece of useless information. You hear a cubit, think of about 18 inches. That's what a cubit is, about 18 inches. So if you take that explanation and apply it to the ark, that was one small ark they had. That was, you couldn't have gotten every animal in the world on that ark. It was too small. The wall was built of diamond, the city of pure gold like clear glass. The foundation of the wall were faced with all kinds of precious stones, diamond, yada, 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 yada. The angel showed me the river of life, rising from the throne of God on the Lamb, flowing crystal clear down the middle of the city street. On either side of the bank were trees of life, which bear 12 crops of fruit a year, one for each month, and the leaves of which are care for the nations. That's pretty much Revelation. Again, go back, the handout I gave you does a neat little 4-page explanation of Revelation, probably much better than I could give. I would say it's scary, but it's very difficult to read. It's very difficult to understand. You almost have to have a commentary if you're going into Revelation. You almost have to have a commentary with you to translate it, to understand what's, like you said, what does the symbol 24 mean? You need a commentary to tell you what, in their judgment, those symbols mean. Obviously, you know, there's no guidebook written by the author, so any type of a thing is a guess, an educated guess. But since John didn't write a cross-reference of what he meant, it's all guesses. It's scary, but it's not scary, because Revelation, again, is basically talking to the Christians who were under siege, who were being persecuted. Many of the members had already been sacrificed, died and martyred. They're basically saying, hey guys, there's hope. Stay the course. Be true to your calling as disciples of Jesus. If you stay the course, this is what will happen. The devil will be put in chains. We'll have 1,000 years of prosperity. Christ will come to rule the world again. It's all messages of hope. You got some unbelievable symbols in there, but again, the symbols have a meaning. If you go back to the Old Testament, some of the symbols in Revelation refer back to the symbols that you found in Daniel. And that's about it. We gave out a couple more handouts here. We have for Paul. Some of these letters here, I encourage you to read these handouts because, again, delves into Paul's theology. Paul was, we questioned that Barbara and I talked about before. How come Paul wasn't the leader of the church? Paul was a theologian. Most of the time, theologians do not make great leaders. They're not born to be a leader. They're not born for that particular role. They're good at other things. And Paul was a theologian. He was good at founding communities. But once he found the community, he left. He left and turned it over to somebody else. He left. The community was headed by, as I read tonight, the community was headed by Jesus Christ. It was not headed by Paul. It was headed by Jesus Christ. So once the community was on the street running, Paul got his water lesson. He headed off to the next city, Paul is a theologian. Paul puts in writing in his letters some of the earliest beliefs in Jesus. When you talk about being righteous, what the gift of faith is to us. None of the apostles talk about that. They talk about Jesus, they talk about parables, they talk about runners with the Pharisees. But nobody sits down and forces, what does faith mean? What is a gift of, what does it mean? Paul does. So you look at Paul and you say, yeah, he's the theologian. The other guys are good, they were apostles, they were followers. But Paul is starting to put a body on the frame. He's starting to say, this is what we are, this is what we believe. So Paul is basically, everybody calls him the first theologian, and that was the reason. He was the first theologian. And that is it for me, guys. Do you have any questions out there? I wish this was
Sorry, there wasn't any there.